I should have died many years ago. My appendix ruptured. I didn't have health insurance, so I told myself the crippling pain was just food poisoning. I waited it out, and then I started to feel better, so I figured that was all. But then the pain came back. Sepsis. And by the time I finally decided to risk medical bankruptcy, I was going into septic shock. I don't recall a lot of being in the hospital. I suspect I was unconscious for most of it. That or hallucinating. Dreamy figures wavered in and out of my awareness. People surrounded my bed and I couldn't tell who any of them were. They looked like gray blurs against a white backdrop. The edges hazy like I was staring at them through frosted glass. There was only one time those figures grew distinct. I still wonder to this day if it was a dream or not, though the results are certainly real enough. I remember being in my hospital bed. Everything was strangely quiet. The monitors were silent, their glowing screens black like ink. The lights in my room were out, and no light shone from the crack under the door. The curtains were drawn over the windows. It felt like I was suspended in a bubble, cut off from the rest of the world. There was someone standing at the foot of my bed. They loomed over me like their presence was far more immense than their frame could contain. I couldn't see any features. They were like a cutout of a person, darker than their surroundings. But they were the first person that felt real since I'd arrived in the hospital.
You're going to die soon. Is this what you want?
I said it wasn't, and I was surprised at how calm I sounded. Maybe the weight of their words hadn't sunk in yet. Maybe it was because this was a dream.
You're quite unremarkable. Very few people would mourn you. What makes your life worth continuing?
Because it's mine. And I'm not ready to give up on it yet.
I don't care what you want. They certainly don't care either.
They gestured their arms out expensively, and somehow I knew they meant the world. The real world. Somewhere far away from here. And all those people out there that continued living their lives, oblivious to my frail, fragile life, tracked on the now silent heart monitor. I knew they were right. If someone told any stranger on the street that I died today, they wouldn't care. The kindest people might feel a vague sense of sorrow, but how could they muster any real emotion for someone they never knew? I didn't matter to anyone except myself.
But maybe you can make yourself matter. Would you like to try that?
I grabbed onto the lifeline they offered. Of course, I said gratefully I'd try my hardest. I didn't know what I was committing to, but I'd soon find out. My next memory is of a nurse leaning over me. She seemed pleasantly surprised as she told me that the infection was gone. Not just receding, gone. Like a miracle had happened overnight. They'd keep me for observation a bit longer and then discharge me the next day if everything looked good. My doctor, when he made the rounds, was similarly surprised that I was still alive. They were certain I was gonna die. Organ failure was the next step, and while they were machines that could replace some of their functions, well, those were last-ditch efforts. In his entire career, he'd never seen someone rebound so quickly. This was my first indication that what I'd seen was not just a dream. I wish I could say things were great after that. They really weren't. I found myself saddled with almost $70,000 in medical bills. The hospital referred me to someone in their billing department that put together a payment plan. But after a free consultation with a bankruptcy lawyer, we decided that it would be easier to repair my credit than to pay that off. especially since I didn't really have much in the way of credit to begin with. Obviously, I lost my job from being in the hospital for so long. A friend let me crash at their place as I couldn't pay rent, and things began a slow, very slow, upward climb after that. For a while, I didn't see any effects from whatever that entity had been. I think it's because I was just so grateful for being alive, and I had plenty of opportunities to unknowingly fulfill what was required of me. Then I hit a bad spot. I felt like I'd never get out of the situation I was in. I went through the motions of going to work, but that was all. My friend, a roommate now, as I could pay a fair share of rent, helped me a lot. They did a lot of the cooking and cleaning and didn't ask for much in return. But then, one morning, I woke up with a burning sensation in my stomach, right in the middle, just above the belly button. For a moment, I panicked, as it felt just as it did when my appendicitis started. But how could that be? They removed the appendix when they opened me up and vacuumed me out. I pulled up my pajamas and stared at my body. There was a perfectly round circle on my stomach where the skin was devoid of color, like the flesh of a corpse. I gingerly touched it, and it felt cold. I went to work anyway because I didn't know what to do and couldn't afford to lose another job. The spot on my stomach occupied every spare thought I had while at the warehouse. Did I dare see a doctor? I still didn't have insurance. How would I pay for the bills? Could you declare bankruptcy twice? By the end of my shift, I was convinced I was going to die. I'd been living on borrowed time, clearly, and now the grave had caught up to me. Going to the doctor would just prolong the inevitable, or at best, plunge me even further into financial ruin. I was so preoccupied with my own despair that I almost didn't notice a coworker asking me if I could take over their shift tomorrow. I mentally did the math. It was my day off, but that would have had a nice bump to my paycheck, and maybe then I could afford an urgent care visit. I agreed, and my coworker nearly melted with relief. My daughter's class is putting on a play tomorrow evening. She made me promise that I'd be there, but they didn't remember that I'd requested that day off when they put together the schedule, I guess. He gave a half-hearted roll of his eyes and hurried off. The next day, at the end of my extra shift, I realized the gnawing pain in my stomach was completely gone. And when I checked, the spot was gone. It took a few more repetitions of this before I caught on to what was happening. The entity said I needed to make myself matter. I began to time it. It'd be a week before the spot appeared. Every day I delayed, it would grow a little. And whenever I did something kind for someone else, it would vanish. And then it would come back the next week. At first, my motives were pure. Forced kindness can still be genuine kindness. It didn't seem to matter how I felt about the act, which made sense. The entity had said that no one out there cared about what I wanted after all. The results were the only thing that were important, so every week I did a good deed, and that made me happy for a long time. There's plenty of opportunities for small stuff. I chased down and returned lost dogs, I bought someone their coffee, I donated to charities. It was so simple, so easy, that for a while I thought this was the best bargain anyone could make. It wasn't even making me be nice all the time. It was only once a week. One nice thing a week. Anyone can accomplish that, right? It's been over 10 years now. My credit finally doesn't suck. I have a job that provides health insurance, and if housing prices weren't insane right now, I'd even be thinking about getting a house. But there's one disturbing trend that's been happening over the 10 past years. one that's occurred gradually. It's taking more and more to get the spot to vanish. It's not frequency either. A couple years ago, when all my usual tactics were failing, I tried doing a good deed every day and nothing happened. I think it's about scale. Donating to a charity won't make the spot go away, but volunteering for one will. Taking a lost dog home won't make the spot go away, but dashing into traffic to grab a dog running in the streets will. Then, a few years ago, I hit on a new tactic. I could manufacture situations to be good in. The first time was an accident. I was helping a friend move. The spot was on my stomach by then, and I knew an hour of physical labor in the aid of a friend no longer got rid of it. But I was hoping if I stayed 2 or 3 hours, that would do the trick. But no more than 30 minutes into the job, my grip slipped, and they dropped their end of the sofa as well because the weight was just too much. It broke one of their toes. I drove them to urgent care and waited to drive them back. And after that, the dead spot was gone. Another time, as an experiment, I stole a neighbor's dog. They had a young son who was dearly attached to the dog, and when he was outside calling for the dog while sobbing uncontrollably, I miraculously appeared with the runaway. When I walked away, leaving him with his beloved pet, I found that the pain and the cold was gone. My good deed has nothing to do with how much good I'm doing in this world. Nothing to do with my own motivations. It is all about how much the other person cherishes it. This is the part I'm a little ashamed of. It's been getting harder and harder to find people in dire need, so when I get desperate, I manufacture a crisis. I've slashed tires, I've stolen purses. I always make sure the person is okay in the end, but their distress is my responsibility. For what it's worth, I try to put it off as long as possible. It can take months for the dead spot to spread to the point where I'm afraid of my life. And these past couple years, that's been the only thing that saved me. I can barely find something good enough to stave off my death. I can barely make myself matter anymore. It can take weeks, a month, or more to finally find someone that needs my help. And when I find them, I'm even more relieved than they are. They tell me I'm a lifesaver, and I'm holding back tears of relief as the pain that suffuses my body and limbs vanishes, thinking that, no, they are the ones saving me. There doesn't seem to be any good deed left that's proportional to the debt I've accumulated over the past 10 years. I see the entity's shadow in the corner of my vision, like it knew this moment would come and is just waiting for me to breathe my last. It almost feels like I've made a bargain with the devil. Well, perhaps I did. I have one last thing I'm going to try. I've been putting it off for as long as I can. The cold is covering most of my body. My fingers are stiff and ache like I've been outside in the snow for hours as I type this. The only spot it hasn't reached is my head and my heart. But I feel that if I wait any longer, it'll consume that too. I think we can all guess what happens next. I've tried everything that used to work in the past. If anything, the pain has only gotten worse with each failed attempt. I think my only chance for survival right now is to do some grand good deed. Something drastic. Something important. And if I can't satisfy this gnawing need in my everyday encounters, then I need to manufacture one. In the trunk of my car are a few gallons of gasoline. I found a house that's remote enough that the fire won't spread. An elderly man lives there. I'm going to set the fire, come back as someone taking a late night walk, and drag him to safety. I don't know if it's worth the cost anymore.